The day began like any other. People went to work, children attended school, and the hum of daily life echoed through bustling cities and quiet rural towns alike. Then, the sky changed. At first, it was subtle reports of strange lights dancing across the heavens, streaking in synchronized patterns too deliberate to be meteor showers. Within hours, those lights became undeniable. Enormous metallic crafts, each the size of a small city, materialized in orbit, their sheer presence blocking out sections of the sun. The world watched in stunned silence as the ships settled into position, ominously stationary yet undeniably threatening. It wasn't long before they made their intentions clear. A broadcast erupted across every frequency: television, radio, internet, all replaced by a single, chilling message. The image of a towering alien figure, reptilian and armored in gleaming obsidian, filled screens worldwide. Yellow eyes glowed with an intelligence that was cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of empathy. The creature, later identified as Warlord Zathor, spoke in a guttural yet strangely comprehensible tone. Humans of Earth, the alien began, its voice resonating with an unnatural power. You have squandered the riches of this planet, tainted its beauty with your wars, and proved yourselves unworthy stewards. We, the Drakens, will now claim what you cannot protect. Surrender your world, your resources, and your future, or face annihilation. You have 48 of your Earth hours to comply. The message was clear. The aliens had not come to negotiate. They had come to conquer. Chaos erupted. News anchors struggled to maintain composure as footage of the alien ships looped endlessly. Social media platforms exploded with speculation, theories ranging from doomsday predictions to desperate suggestions for communication. Governments across the globe scrambled to respond. Military forces were mobilized, weapons readied, and defenses fortified. But the reality was sobering: humanity was woefully outmatched. The Drakens' technology was light years ahead, their ships bristling with weaponry that could level continents. Against such a force, Earth's combined might seem laughably insufficient. Yet, amidst the panic, there were voices calling for calm. Scientists, diplomats, and thinkers argued that brute force would lead only to humanity's extinction. We cannot win a war of weapons, declared Dr. Elena Morales, a renowned historian during a live broadcast. But perhaps we can win a war of minds. Her words resonated with those who believed humanity's greatest strength lay not in its arsenals but in its adaptability, creativity, and resilience. Behind closed doors, the United Nations convened an emergency session. The decision was unanimous: a delegation would be sent to the Drakens with the goal of establishing communication, understanding their motivations, and if possible, negotiating peace. The delegation's composition was unconventional, a mix of scientists, historians, and diplomats, led by a figure no one expected: Ray Thompson, a popular comedian known for his sharp wit and disarming humor. The reasoning was simple: if humanity was to stand any chance, it would not be through intimidation, but through connection. As the hours ticked down, the world watched with bated breath. The shuttle carrying Earth's unlikely ambassadors launched into the skies, heading straight toward the massive alien mothership. What awaited them was anyone's guess, but one thing was clear: the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The human delegation's shuttle approached the alien mothership with an air of tense anticipation. The craft was small compared to the monolithic vessel looming above, its surface an intricate web of shifting metal plates that shimmered like liquid obsidian. Inside the shuttle, the atmosphere was heavy. Every member of the team wore the weight of the world's survival on their shoulders, but none more visibly than Ray Thompson. He wasn't a scientist, diplomat, or soldier, just a comedian suddenly thrust into a situation more surreal than any joke he'd ever written. "Are we sure this isn't some elaborate prank?" Ray muttered, trying to mask his anxiety with humor. Dr. Elena Morales, seated beside him, gave him a sharp look. "Stay focused," she said, though even she couldn't hide the slight tremor in her voice. As the shuttle docked, a low, resonant hum reverberated through the craft, signaling that they were being brought into the alien ship's internal hangar. The landing was smooth but intimidating. Outside the window, a team of Draken guards awaited their arrival. Each stood over 8 feet tall, their muscular, scaled bodies encased in armor that seemed to pulse with energy. Weapons, unlike anything the humans had ever seen, glowed faintly in their hands. The shuttle doors hissed open, and the delegation stepped out, doing their best to appear calm and composed. The hangar was vast, its walls lined with what appeared to be intricate carvings that glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the ship's hum. It felt less like stepping into a machine and more like entering a living organism. The Draken guard said nothing, merely gesturing for the humans to follow. The delegation exchanged nervous glances before falling into step. Ray, trailing slightly behind, couldn't resist whispering, "Well, at least they didn't vaporize us yet. That's got to be a good sign." They were led down a series of corridors, each more alien and awe-inspiring than the last, until they reached a grand chamber. At its center stood Axathor himself. The warlord was even more imposing in person, his yellow eyes glowing with a predatory intensity that made the humans instinctively shrink back. He towered over them, his armor adorned with intricate symbols that radiated power and authority. "You dare to approach me," Zathor's voice boomed, each word echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "Your defiance is either bravery or stupidity. Speak quickly before I tire of this charade." Dr. Morales stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "We come not as conquerors or cowards, but as representatives of Earth, seeking understanding." Zathor sneered, his sharp teeth glinting. "Understanding? What can I learn from a species so weak it cannot protect its own world?" Before anyone else could respond, Ray spoke up. "Well, for starters, you could learn how to tell a decent joke." That introduction, way too dramatic. A little subtlety goes a long way, big guy. The room fell silent. The Draken guard shifted uncomfortably, and the human delegation froze, anticipating the worst. But then, something unexpected happened. A deep, rumbling sound emerged from one of the Draken officers standing behind Zathor. It was laughter, a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to catch even the warlord off guard. Zathor's eyes narrowed as he turned toward his subordinate. Silence, he barked, but the moment had already broken the tension. Ray, emboldened, continued. "Look, we get it. You're here to conquer us, show off your cool tech, and make us feel small. But maybe we can skip the whole blowing us up part and jump straight to the learning how not to take life so seriously bit." The warlord stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice laced with both curiosity and disdain, he replied, "You amuse me, human. For now I will allow your presence. Speak your terms, but do not mistake my patience for weakness." It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time since their arrival, the humans felt a glimmer of hope. Ray gave a small, triumphant grin, his humor carving a fragile path where logic and fear could not. The chamber where negotiations began was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It wasn't just a room but a living monument to Draken history and power. Towering walls shimmered with iridescent light, etched with scenes that seemed to shift and move as if the very walls were alive, telling stories of conquests and victories. In the center, a table rose from the floor, its surface a smooth, dark material that pulsed faintly under their hands. The delegation sat uneasily across from Zathor and his advisors. The warlord's piercing gaze swept over them, his expression unreadable but undeniably predatory. Dr. Elena Morales began cautiously, presenting humanity's case. She spoke of Earth's diversity, resilience, and history, emphasizing the potential for cooperation rather than conflict. Zathor listened in stony silence, his armored hands resting on the table as though waiting for something, perhaps an excuse to dismiss them entirely. Ray Thompson, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, visibly less formal. He studied the Drakens with a mix of curiosity and calculated nonchalance, his mind spinning for ways to diffuse the tension. His moment came when Dr. Morales mentioned humanity's achievements in the arts, science, and culture, showcasing holographic images of Earth's wonders, the pyramids, the Great Wall, space exploration, and artistic masterpieces. Zathor scoffed. "Pretty baubles," he said, waving a clawed hand dismissively. "Symbols of fleeting success. Your kind builds to distract from your inevitable destruction." Ray seized the opportunity. "Fleeting success? Buddy, the pyramids have been standing for thousands of years. You seen anything that old lately? Or do you knock over all your cool stuff after a few centuries? The room froze. For a moment, even the other humans thought Ray had gone too far. But then, another of Exether's advisors, a broad, scarred Draken with a voice like grinding stone, let out a low chuckle. Ray grinned. See? This guy gets it. We're not just about building, we're about surviving. And sometimes when things look grim, we laugh about it. Helps keep the existential dread at bay. You ever try that? Athor's yellow eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something else, curiosity perhaps. He leaned forward. You mock your own survival, human. Is this some form of madness, or do you truly find strength in frivolity? Ray shrugged. A bit of both, probably. But I'll tell you this, it's kept us going. Every time the odds were against us, we found a way to fight back. Not always with weapons. Sometimes with ideas, sometimes with grit, and yeah, sometimes with a laugh. The warlord seemed to consider this. He gestured for one of his advisors, who stepped forward with a glowing orb. The advisor touched it, and an image appeared in alien world, its surface scorched and barren. This was our home once, Exether said. We laughed too, once, before the Great Wars consumed us. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken meaning. Dr. Morales leaned forward, her voice gentle. Then perhaps that's where we can start. You've seen destruction. So have we. Maybe it's time we both try something new. Zathor regarded her for a long moment, then glanced at Ray. You speak of resilience and laughter, but your kind is weak. Show me something that proves otherwise. Ray smirked. Oh, I've got just the thing. That evening, the delegation introduced the Drakens to a staple of human culture, food. Using their limited supplies, they prepared a meal to share, a risky move, considering the biological differences. They started with something simple, Earth's spiciest chili. Zathor, ever the skeptic, watched as Ray took a bite, his face barely hiding the heat. It's amazing, Ray managed, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Your turn. The warlord, never one to back down from a challenge, took a bite. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes widened, his scaled face twitching as the spice hit him like a plasma blast. His advisors looked alarmed, but Zathor raised a claw, signaling them to stand down. I see, he said, his voice strained but steady. Humans are insane. Ray burst out laughing, and this time, even more of the Drakens joined in. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a crack in the wall of hostility that separated their species. For the first time, the humans saw something in their alien hosts that felt almost familiar. In the days that followed, the initial hostility between the humans and the Drakens began to shift. While Zathor remained stern and skeptical, he allowed the human delegation to remain aboard the mothership. This decision alone sent shockwaves through his ranks. Never before had outsiders, let alone a species deemed inferior, been treated with anything other than contempt or eradication. The humans wasted no time capitalizing on this rare opportunity. Each day, they presented new facets of humanity's story. Dr. Elena Morales recounted tales of survival and resilience, from the ice ages to global pandemics. She emphasized how, time and again, humans had faced extinction-level threats, yet found ways to endure and rebuild. Our strength isn't in our bodies or even in our weapons, she explained during one presentation. It's in our ability to adapt, to persist, and to find meaning even in the darkest times. Exether listened but remained unconvinced. Your species thrives on desperation. That is not strength, it is merely stubbornness. Ray, always quick with a comeback, leaned in and grinned. Stubbornness has kept us alive this long. You might call it a flaw, but we call it tenacity. And besides, what's wrong with a little desperation? You'd be surprised what people can achieve when their backs are against the wall. The warlord's expression was unreadable, but he didn't dismiss Ray's words outright. That alone was progress. As the days stretched into a week, the delegation introduced the Drakens to more than just humanity's history. Music became a surprising point of interest. When the humans played recordings of orchestral pieces, the haunting melodies of Beethoven and the complex rhythms of jazz, the Drakens were visibly affected. Though they did not express emotions in the same way, their body language hinted at intrigue, perhaps even admiration. One evening, Ray suggested a live demonstration. Using a simple acoustic guitar, he strummed a folksy tune, his voice carrying a raw, unpolished honesty that silenced the room. The Drakens watched intently, their unblinking eyes fixed on him. When he finished, there was a long silence before one of Zathar's advisors spoke. Your sounds, they speak of sorrow and joy, both at once. How is this possible? Ray set the guitar down and shrugged. That's life, isn't it? We're always carrying a bit of both. Music just helps us make sense of it. Zather seemed deep in thought. You channel chaos into harmony, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. But it wasn't just Earth's creativity that began to chip away at the Drakens' perception of humanity. It was their stories. Dr. Morales shared accounts of unity in the face of disaster, how nations set aside differences during crises to save lives. She spoke of ordinary individuals who performed extraordinary acts of heroism, often with no reward or recognition. Why would someone sacrifice for others? Zather asked, his tone sharp with suspicion. Your species values survival, yet you celebrate those who die for no personal gain. Elena met his gaze firmly. Because we understand that survival isn't just about the individual, it's about the collective. A single life is precious, but when one life is sacrificed to save many, it creates something greater than any of us alone. That's what makes us human. Her words lingered in the air, drawing a rare silence from the warlord. As the humans shared their stories, they began to learn more about the Drakens as well. What had initially seemed like an unfeeling, monolithic species was revealed to have its own complexities. The Drakens had once been a deeply communal people, bonded by shared struggles and triumphs. But centuries of war, conquest, and loss had stripped them of their unity, leaving them as fractured as the worlds they had ravaged. You remind us of what we were, Zather admitted one evening, his voice unusually subdued. Before our wars consumed us, we too valued unity and resilience. But now, we only know strength through domination. Ray, never one to miss an opportunity, replied. Sounds like you've got a case of what we call burnout. Maybe it's time you all took a vacation, like, I don't know, a couple of millennia just chilling with us humans. We're good at rebuilding, you know. To everyone's surprise, Zather didn't dismiss the idea outright. Instead, he simply said, perhaps there is more to you than I thought. The humans knew they hadn't won over the Drakens yet, but they had planted seeds of doubt in their hearts. Seeds that, with time and care, might grow into something far greater than peace understanding. As the humans continued their efforts to bridge the divide, the Drakens' initial skepticism began to waver. What started as grudging tolerance turned into something closer to curiosity. The delegation's persistent honesty, creativity, and ability to find connection through the simplest of gestures made it impossible for the Drakens to dismiss them outright. Zather, ever the stoic leader, observed these interactions with a mix of fascination and restraint. He often watched from the shadows, his piercing yellow eyes missing nothing. One particular moment seemed to capture his attention, a session where the humans shared stories of their world's greatest struggles. Ray Thompson, though usually the delegation's comic relief, told a somber tale of his grandfather, who had survived a global conflict during the 20th century. He was just a kid when war came to his village, Ray began, his usual playful tone replaced with quiet intensity. He lost his family, his home, everything. But instead of breaking, he found ways to help others, sneaking food to starving neighbors, hiding those who were hunted. He used what little he had to fight back. Not with guns, but with kindness. He always said that surviving wasn't just about staying alive. It was about staying human. The room was silent. Even the ever-skeptical Drakens seemed to hang on his words. Zather finally spoke. Your kind romanticizes survival. You make it sound noble, yet it is born of desperation. Do you truly believe such acts can shape the course of a species? Ray nodded. Absolutely. It's not just about survival for the sake of it, it's about what you do while you survive. Every little act of kindness, every decision to help instead of harm, it adds up. Over time, it becomes who we are. Zathar's gaze lingered on Ray for a moment before shifting to the rest of the delegation. You speak of collective strength, of unity through shared struggle. Yet your species still fights amongst itself. How can you claim to have mastered what my kind has lost? Dr. Elena Morales stepped in. We haven't mastered it, she admitted. Far from it. But we try. That's the difference. Humanity isn't perfect, but we're always striving to be better. And sometimes it's the trying that matters more than the outcome. These conversations began to ripple through the Draken ranks. The delegation noticed subtle changes in their hosts. Guards once rigid and distant started asking questions about Earth. Advisors who had been cold and dismissive began listening more attentively, their expressions less guarded. One day, an unexpected event deepened the bond further. A human satellite in Earth's orbit malfunctioned, threatening to collide with the mothership. The Drakens initially prepared to destroy the object, but the humans, led by Dr. Morales, argued for a different approach. Let us fix it, she insisted. It's a relic of our past, a piece of our history. Destroying it would be a loss for us, but repairing it could be a sign of what we can accomplish together. Zathar hesitated, but eventually granted permission. The humans, using their own technology and the Drakens' vastly superior resources, collaborated to save the satellite. It was a small act, but the process forged a fragile partnership. The Drakens, for the first time in generations, experienced cooperation with another species. As the satellite was safely maneuvered back into orbit, Ray looked at Zathar and smirked. See? Not bad for a bunch of desperate survivors, huh? Zathar didn't respond immediately, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes: respect, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement. Later that evening, Zathar addressed the delegation in private. Your species is flawed, he began, his tone as sharp as ever. You are weak, divided, and prone to self-destruction. Yet you are also resilient, resourceful, and capable of acts I had long thought impossible. I will not yet call you allies, but I will not call you enemies either. For now, you have earned the right to be heard. It was the closest thing to a breakthrough the humans could have hoped for. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a glimmer of possibility that this war could end not in destruction, but in something far more profound: mutual respect. The delegation knew there was still much work to be done, but as they looked at one another, they allowed themselves a moment of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons, but its capacity to connect even with those who seemed beyond reach. The transformation aboard the Draken mothership was subtle but undeniable. What had begun as an armed standoff had evolved into cautious exchanges, with both sides beginning to see glimpses of themselves in the other. The humans, with their relentless creativity and boundless adaptability, had started to chip away at the rigid, war-bound culture of the Drakens. Zathar, once a paragon of dominance and control, now seemed to carry an unspoken weight in his stride. The conversations with the humans had stirred memories of his own people's lost ideals. He found himself seeking out the delegation, observing their strange ways and occasionally engaging in dialogue that was no longer entirely adversarial. It was a strange position for a warlord, and even he was not entirely sure why he allowed it to continue. The breakthrough came when a critical situation unfolded. A small Draken vessel on a reconnaissance mission near Earth's moon malfunctioned, its systems crippled by unexpected solar activity. The crew sent a distress signal to the mothership, but its location and the nature of the damage meant that a rescue mission would be difficult, even for Draken technology. Dr. Morales, who had been present when the distress call was received, immediately stepped forward. "We can help," she said, her voice steady. Zathar turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "Your species lacks the technology to reach them in time. What could you possibly offer?" Elena took a breath. "We may not have the same level of technology, but we've spent decades solving problems with limited resources. Let us work with your engineers. Together we can find a way." The room fell silent. The idea of collaboration was foreign to the Drakens. To them, strength was solitary, a display of dominance over all obstacles. Yet Zathar found himself intrigued. After a long pause, he gave a curt nod. Very well. But if this fails, your lives will be forfeit. With the clock ticking, the humans and Drakens worked side by side for the first time. It was an uneasy partnership at first, with both sides struggling to understand the other's methods and terminology. The Drakens were efficient and direct, their technology far beyond anything the humans could fully comprehend. The humans, in contrast, relied on creativity and improvisation, often suggesting solutions that seemed absurd but somehow worked. Ray, as usual, found a way to lighten the tension. You know, he said to one of the Draken engineers, "This would go a lot faster if you didn't growl every time I touched a button. I promise I'm not trying to blow us up." The Draken let out a low rumble, which Ray decided to interpret as laughter. Together, they devised a plan. Using a combination of Draken propulsion systems and human ingenuity, they created a makeshift repair module that could be remotely piloted to the stranded vessel. The operation was risky, but it was their only chance. The launch was tense, with both sides crowded into the control room, watching as the module made its way to the damaged ship. Minutes felt like hours as the module docked and began its repairs. Finally, the transmission came through. The Draken crew was safe, and the vessel was functional again. A cheer erupted from the humans, and to their surprise, several of the Drakens joined in, their deep voices rumbling through the chamber. Zather stood silent, his expression unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something unusual pride. Later, as the humans celebrated quietly among themselves, Zather approached them. "You have accomplished what I thought impossible," he said. "Not just the rescue, but the collaboration. You have shown us that strength does not always come from standing alone." Dr. Morales smiled. "It's not easy for us either, but sometimes the hardest things are the most important." Zather regarded her for a long moment before nodding. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your ways. I will consider it." It wasn't a declaration of peace, but it was a start. The humans had done more than save lives. They had proven that even the fiercest warriors could find value in unity. For the first time, the possibility of a future without war seemed within reach. The days following the rescue of the Draken crew marked a turning point, not just for the humans aboard the mothership, but for the Drakens themselves. The air of mistrust that had hung thick between the two species began to lift. Drakens, who had once avoided the humans, now watched them with something resembling interest, even respect. And though Zather remained guarded, his orders reflected a shift in priorities. Hostilities against Earth were to be suspended indefinitely. For the humans, this fragile truce was a triumph, but they knew it was also precarious. Peace with the Drakens would require more than a single act of cooperation. It would demand understanding, trust, and the rebuilding of something the warlike species had long lost hope. Ray Thompson took it upon himself to push this newfound momentum. One evening, he stood before a gathering of Drakens, strumming his guitar and singing a tune that echoed through the mothership's vast halls. The melody was simple, haunting, and undeniably human. As the last notes faded, he looked up at the imposing figures around him. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "we're not so different. You fight because you're afraid of losing what you have. We fight for the same reason. The only difference is, we've learned that sometimes the best way to win isn't to destroy, it's to build something worth fighting for." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The Drakens exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable but their postures less rigid. One of Zather's advisors, a scarred veteran named Thrak, stepped forward. "Your words are bold, human," he said. "But words alone do not change the course of a people. Show us what your kind would build, and perhaps we will listen." Dr. Elena Morales seized the moment. "We have an idea," she said, her voice steady. "Let us take you to Earth not to conquer it, but to see it. Let us show you what we've built, not out of strength or fear, but out of hope and collaboration. Let us show you what peace looks like." The proposal stunned everyone in the room, including the human delegation. The thought of inviting their invaders to Earth seemed audacious, even reckless. But Elena pressed on. "You came here to understand whether we were worthy of survival," she continued. "You've seen our resilience, our creativity, and our willingness to work together. But you haven't seen the heart of who we are. If you truly want to know humanity, you need to see the world we call home. Zather stood silently for a long time, his gaze piercing as he studied the humans. Finally, he spoke. "Very well, I will see this Earth of yours. But know this, if your claims of unity and hope are lies, I will not hesitate to finish what I began." The journey to Earth was unlike anything the humans had anticipated. Draken warships, once poised for destruction, now flew alongside the planet's satellites in an uneasy ceasefire. From orbit, the Drakens observed Earth's swirling blue oceans, sprawling cities, and lush green landscapes. The sight seemed to affect even the most hardened among them. When the delegation brought Zather and a select group of Drakens to the surface, they were greeted with a mix of fear and wonder. Carefully planned visits showcased the best of humanity: hospitals where doctors fought to save lives, schools where children of all backgrounds learned together, and places of worship where people sought meaning in the vastness of existence. One moment stood out above all others. The group visited a disaster recovery site where volunteers were rebuilding homes after a devastating hurricane. Zather watched as humans of every race, age, and creed worked side by side, their hands covered in dirt and sweat, their faces set with determination. "These people have lost everything," he said, his tone almost questioning. "Yet they rebuild, not for themselves, but for others." Elena nodded. "That's what we do. We don't just survive, we help each other survive. That's how we endure." For the first time, Zather's stern mask cracked. His expression softened, and he turned to his advisors. "Perhaps there is more strength in this way than we believed." By the time the Drakens returned to their mothership, the warlord's demeanor had shifted entirely. He called a council of his advisors and the human delegation, declaring his intent to withdraw his forces and negotiate a lasting peace. "This war was meant to test your worthiness," Zather said, addressing the humans. "You have shown us something far greater. Your strength is not in your weapons or your resilience, but in your ability to create harmony from chaos. Perhaps it is time we learn from you." The announcement sent shockwaves through both species. For the first time in centuries, the Drakens considered a future not dictated by conquest, but by collaboration. And for humanity, the moment was a testament to their greatest strength, their capacity to inspire and transform, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the Drakens prepared to leave Earth's orbit, Ray couldn't resist one final quip. "So does this mean we're friends now, or are we just frenemies with better communication skills?" Zather let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "Let us call it the beginning of something new, human. The rest remains to be written." And with that, the war that had seemed inevitable ended not with a bang, but with the quiet promise of something far more profound: peace.